Hey guys, hope you're having a lovely weekend. My name is Danish and welcome back to the channel. So today's point of contention is my personal laptop. So I bought my laptop in 2015 and I haven't told you which laptop it is. So my laptop is the 2015 15-inch retina MacBook Pro with dedicated graphics. So I want to talk about this device and give my long-term review and impressions about the device. I know I haven't done the typical unboxing or the first round of reviews because my channel wasn't alive back then. Sorry. So getting back to the topic, I've owned this device for half a decade now. So I'm in a prime position to know what I'm talking about. So let's get started. So starting off with the specs, I have the i7-4700HQ, which is a 4-core 8-thread processor with Intel Iris Pro graphics along with a dedicated AMD Radeon R9 M370X with 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gig NVMe SSD. So, and the display is a 16 by 10 LED IPS display with a resolution of 2880 by 1800, and I have a 99 watt hour battery, backlit keyboard, front firing dual side speakers, and a novelty webcam which no one talks about. So let's scoot over and start with the processor. So this is the 4th generation of the Intel i-series processors, and it was the Haswell 22nm process. So if you're going to compare it to today, we have the 14nm process, or let's just say 14nm plus because it has been there for so many generations and slowly optimizing it, while AMD is already at 7nm, but the IPC improvements doesn't really make much of a difference if you don't have the raw performance of the single core which Zen 2 is bringing to Intel. So there's a good competition right there right now, which is good for the consumers, but I digress. Now coming on to graphics cards, the integrated and the dedicated graphics give it a good fighting chance for intensive workloads or something heavy like editing, Photoshop, and mild gaming. The processor is sturdy, but the GPUs are a bit dated in today's market, so I don't want to raise your expectations by saying it's a good gaming machine because it's not. So I get around 40 FPS in CSGO at 1080p resolution. I have to say it's not bad, but it's playable. But it really does work well with video editing software. I use DaVinci Resolve on it personally, and I have edited all of my videos on the device. It does start stuttering and gets pretty laggy if I am farther than 10 minutes into the timeline with all the effects before added. So it's something that I have to adjust with for now, but it's acceptable. It's a workable device and I'm not complaining. Coming on to the display, it's a pretty bright display. It's 2880 by 1800, which is kind of in between 4K and 1080p, but being retina quality with the PPI, it's a good enough screen with great color accuracy which you can work on nicely. And with macOS scaling, it really works well with me. On Windows, it's a bit hit or miss with the boot camp, but it works most of the time. The keyboard is the old reliable Bessie with the scissor mechanism and quite decent key travel. It's not mechanical keys level of key travel, but it's great that you can type quite fast on it and it works nicely. And until last year, this was the best keyboard on a Mac because they went to the butterfly keyboard which failed. So they now got back to the scissor mechanism on the 16-inch and the MacBook Air, so the old reliable is working nicely without many failures. And the backlight helps when you're using it in the dark, but I typically don't use it a lot because I don't use my laptop sitting in the dark at any moment. So it's a great thing to have, but you won't miss it if it isn't there, kind of thing. Then coming on to trackpad, this is where Apple has excelled quite nicely all the way back since the Apple MacBook Air. It has great touch sensitivity, palm rejection, and you can, when they brought this trackpad with the force touch, you could click anywhere. It was like compared to Windows laptops without precision drivers, and even with precision drivers, this is by far a lot better. After this generation in 2016, the newer MacBook Pros got a lot larger trackpad than this, which I haven't used that much to give an opinion, but I'd say the larger the better. With the palm rejection that the Apple has is quite good, so it might be nice, but I haven't used it, so I can't give my opinion on it. The battery is a 99 watt hour battery, which is just shy of the 100 watt hour battery, which is the legal limit that you can carry around when you fly. Now coming on to the pièce de résistance of this laptop and why it is so widely revered as one of the greatest MacBook Pros ever is because of the ports. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last MacBook Pro generation with ports. I mean USB, Thunderbolt 2, display HDMI, SD card slot. All of these are present in this device, and if you're comparing them to the measly 4 Thunderbolt ports on the latest generation ones without adapters, you will not survive. So let's start off on each side. So on the left side we have the MagSafe 2, the old reliable MagSafe 2, which people still miss on the latest generations and try to use a Type-C adapter type for the magnetic connection system. Then come the two Thunderbolt 2 ports with 10 gigabit bandwidth, which you can connect to a lot of peripherals. I am currently using one of those as a VGA with a VGA adapter for my old monitor. Follow that by that you have a USB 3.0 port and a headphone jack, a headphone microphone combi jack. Coming to the other side, we have USB 3.0 full size HDMI and an full size SD card slot. Now moving away from the specs of the device, let's talk about where this device falls into in the terms of categories of laptop, because this is not a light device and this is not the most powerful device. So in that, the price, power, performance, weight and cost cycle, this comes somewhere in the middle part of that area, because it is fairly powerful and fairly lightweight and has great battery life and uses a lot of premium materials, and it is built to last a while. Now you're not going to accept this, but these are built to last longer and not break down pretty often. That's just my opinion and my experience. I have had it just serviced once with a dead fan before, and the battery is currently running at 65% full capacity. Well, because I have more than 1600 cycles on the battery. Typically a laptop battery is conditioned to hold 1000 cycles and maintain an 80% of a battery charge. So I'm currently at 65% and I need to replace the battery soon, but as I don't use it outside a lot, I just leave it plugged in, so just to not add more cycles and degrade the battery even more. Coming on to software experience, I don't want to talk a lot about this because it's a huge topic and I want to make a separate video about this, but from El Capitan, Mojave, Catalina and now macOS Big Sur, it works fine. It's optimized nicely. I have apps that work well. The jump to Catalina with the loss of 32-bit support was a bit of a bummer, and it took a while for the developers to change up and redevelop their apps to work on 64, but it happens. Let's just skip over that. So coming on to performance scores, I'm using Cinebench R20 as the app for CPU performance metrics, because this is a cross-platform application which I can use on Windows, and I'm using a comparable laptop that I got my dad a couple of years ago, which was the Dell Inspiron 5575, which has the Ryzen 5 2500U if I remember correctly. So it is a fair competition between the two devices, where the MacBook Pro scores a 318 on the single core and a 1251 on the multi-core, and the Dell scores a 328 on the single core and a 1352 on the multi-core. Now this is just the CPU metrics that I have tested. For GPU, I'm using TimeSpy version 1.0 in which the MacBook Pro scored a 905 and the Dell scored a 956. Now I just want to throw a wrench into this by adding the desktop CPU of 3100. So this is the AMD Radeon 3 3100. So this is the bottom of the barrel, the lowest chip in the Ryzen lineup, and I put this through the R20 test and it scored a single core of 437 and a multi-core score of 2351. Now looking at these scores, the 4870HQ is at par with the Ryzen 5 2500U, which is I think 2 years old, while the Intel counterpart is around 6 years old. So I'd say that's a respectable score, but the Ryzen 3100 just blows it out of the park and shows the performance gains and how far processors have come in these last 5 years. On to the 3D Mark scores, and the Vega 8 integrated APU in the 2500U holds its own against the Intel Pro and the AMD Radeon R9 dedicated GPU. So in terms of performance, you might say both of these devices have the same performance, but if you're going to compare it in real life, it's a lot of different story, because the screen on the MacBook Pro is better, the keyboard on the MacBook Pro is a lot better, the trackpad on the MacBook Pro is a lot better, the ports is a tie among the both of them, but the storage is where the MacBook Pro pulls ahead with the NVMe SSD, where the Dell has a spinning Rust 5200 RPM HDD, which is a disappointment really. It's holding the laptop back, and I really need to add an SSD to that device, but that's a future project that I want to do. But if you really want to talk about gaming on the MacBook Pro, it's good enough for casual gamers, because I play City Skylines and CSGO quite regularly, and at 1080p they're playable. I have no complaints. I tried playing Destiny 2 on this, but I had to pull it all the way down to 720p, and with the servers of Destiny are the way they are, it just keeps kicking me out, and it's an unpleasant experience when it's not working, but it works good enough when it does. So I digress, but I know what you're going to ask me. Does it run Crysis? Yes it does. Does it run Doom Eternal? No. Does it run Microsoft Flight Simulator? I don't even want to try it because I'm afraid my laptop will go up in flames. So yeah, that's not gonna happen. Now the question you're having is, why is this dude comparing a 5-year-old laptop which had a price of 2 lakh rupees, comparing it to a 2-year-old laptop which has a price tag of 50,000 rupees? Even if you factor in depreciation, the MacBook Pro still holds its value at 70,000 rupees in the second-hand market. The simple question is, I have both of these devices on hand. I use both of them quite regularly, and on laptops, unless you have a feel for the hardware, and because there are so many more variables, it's not that easy to give a recommendation just based on specs. Now, does this mean you should go running around finding a old used 2015 MacBook Pro and buy it for yourself? No, definitely not. If you really want a MacBook, save up and go for the MacBook Air, a new one. If you're on Windows, there are so many different laptops that you can choose from. If you want a gaming laptop that is quite thick and not so portable, or a thin and light which does not have that much performance, or a low budget one which has mediocre hardware, or a high-end ultrabook, there's a huge plethora of choices over there. I would love to make videos on this topic a lot more, and it will take me a lot more research, but I will do it at some day, because I have quite a few interesting insights about this topic. So that's it about this video. So what have we learned in this video is, don't not buy the MacBook Pro 2015 or the Dell 5575 just because a random dude on YouTube just made a video on it. Yeah, don't blame me after that. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay indoors, wear masks, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.